like, Ethan. So let's jump into it. Victor Wembanyama on the Spurs. What are your thoughts on his fit? Obviously, the team is going to now be molded around him. We've had conversations about him playing the four, and that's something that you and me would like to happen. But, we'll have to see how things play out. We'll have to see how Summer League plays out. And, it just got announced that he's not going to be playing in the FIBA World Cup this summer. He's going to save, those legs, if you will, for Summer League and preparing for the Spurs. And also him taking that time off will allow for him to play in the Olympics next summer, which is really the main thing that he cares about. France will probably still qualify for that. Well, that'll be the Olympics, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So the FIBA Cup doesn't even matter for the Olympics. So, anyways, I think there are some Olympic qualifiers, but France will definitely get in, even if they didn't have him. That's what I was thinking. They might have to get in, but they'll have him regardless. Anyways, Ethan, Victor Wembanyama on the Spurs. The floor is yours.
Well, his talent speaks for itself, and we have exhausted, I feel like, every video we
Right.
talk about, his game, his being so versatile, so incredibly unique at 7'3" to be able to handle the ball the way he does, shoot the ball the way he does, defend the rim. What kind of impact will he have as far as, his on the court play? I think it'll be, probably a little slow, or not slow, but underwhelming in terms of what the expectations are. But I still think he's
Absolutely.
going to get like 17 and 10. I don't think that that's at all
Yeah.
out of the question. It might even be higher. We'll have to see, because
Yeah.
you really don't know with these foreign prospects how they're going to come in. It could be an Andre Bargnani situation, or it could be a Luka Doncic situation.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's really, a flip of the coin. But the thing that I've taken away the most, Jude, in these couple days after the draft is just off the court. His personality, his incredible wisdom at such a
Yeah.
young age.
His demeanor.
He seems on one side so incredibly grateful and emotional and happy to be in San Antonio and to be finally in the NBA and all those great things that go along with that. But at the same time, you kind of get the idea that this guy, he's got a different kind of confidence level about him.
Yeah.
The way he's speaking about his own game, his teammates, what he expects from himself, the kind of, he wants to be able to play as many games as possible his rookie year. He wants to win a ring as soon as possible. He loves the winning culture. He talked to the, Tim, Manu, David, and Sean. Like,
Yep.
there's all these little things. And then if you go to his likes on Twitter, he liked a thing where Rockets fans were teasing Spurs fans about how the Rockets are going to dominate the Spurs and
Yeah.
Wemby and, all this stuff. He liked that video. So it's all these little things. You're like, okay, this guy might have a bit of a competitive screw
Oh, he
loose.
does. He
And
does.
I'm extremely excited to see how that not only relates to the game, like actual game time, but then training camp and practices as well. How that correlates with his relationship with Sohan, who he already seems to have a good relationship with.
Yeah.
Jeremy and Keldon were both at his press conference.
Yeah.
All these little small things that I think are going to pay dividends in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to pick a point of what you covered there,
Yeah,
Ethan,
sorry, I went big
because that
picture.
was a lot. No, don't feel bad at all. That was all great stuff. That kind of jumps into when it comes to the welcome ceremony and the press conference. And obviously, we mentioned this even on the live stream, I believe, when we were doing it. On JJ Redick's podcast, you could tell that just the way that he speaks, the way that he describes things, the way that he describes his thinking patterns. Even, I mean, it was just like, that's why he joked on the episode. He's like, this dude has reached enlightenment, and that's on top of all this other hype train that's been behind him. And that was the thing that I took away most from the welcome ceremony and the press conference. There's not too much that you can take away from that, other than if they just say something, flat out, in the press
Yeah.
conference that's surprising. But the thing that stood out to me was just, once again, when you really got to see him, like in the Spurs press conference, in an NBA press conference, and now we know he's on the team. It's not just all this speculation, tanking for him and all that stuff. It really just kind of sunk in a little bit, like, okay, how different this dude is. And, I think that it'll continue to sink in more as we see how he handles losses, how he handles adversity, as you mentioned. Yeah, there's really not much else to say with the other stuff that you covered, other than the fact that, he's the most generational prospect that we've seen in a long time. It seems like for his mold and his build, he's a perfect fit for the modern NBA, and also a perfect fit for the Spurs organization as well.
I was curious, Jude, did you see the Dan Patrick interview yesterday with Sean Elliott?
I did not. What'd he
He
say?
interviewed Sean, and he asked Sean how that dinner went and what did Wemby actually, like, ask them, and Sean spoke extremely highly of his personality, like we're saying, how incredibly, um,
Well
what's the word?
spoken, all that
Well-spoken
stuff.
and yeah, etcetera, etcetera. But he said the biggest question that stood out to him was he was asking these guys on road trips for away games, how do you not stay tired? How do you keep your body and your mind rested? And Sean was like, "That's weird because most young guys are like, what kind of clubs are you going to in LA? Like, what are the
Yeah.
cool restaurants, the spots I got to go hit?" And he was like, "No, how do I make sure I don't overly exhaust myself?" And he's talking about literally like getting sleep, napping, stuff like that. And I was like, "Wow, I would never have thought to ask that question if I was in his shoes."
I'm so glad you brought up that point, Ethan, because he had an interesting comment in his press conference. He
Oh,
said, "I know I'm going to retire before I'm 40," which makes sense.
yeah,
It makes sense with all of the preparation that he puts into his body and just with the reality of his frame. That doesn't mean he can't be incredible for 15 years.
yeah,
That doesn't and we'll have to see how it all plays out. That's the other thing. Obviously the hype is all there. It seems like when it comes to the hype, that's why the only comparison is LeBron James, because when it comes to the hype, it seems like he's the most sure thing to have this type of hype, even more than Zion, just
yeah,
because there's less weight, one, but then on top of that, it's also just all of the French league records, playing multiple years of pro basketball. The list goes on and on, and then on top of that, this French league playoff run, his final season where he loses to the Monaco, who's the powerhouse of the league, and they weren't even really expected to be in the finals. So there's so many, the list, all the records that he broke this season as well, the jump, the difference that you can see from him in
mhm,
the year prior when he was playing for Tony Parker's team to this year physically. He mentioned that in the press conference when Jeremy Sohan was there asking him questions before he was even drafted. And he said you can really see the difference in me physically when he was asking, how do you think your game has grown since we played in 2018? And yeah, man, I could go on and on. I lost a little bit of my train of
no,
thought
you're
there.
fine, you're fine. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it. I don't really have anything else to add.
On Wemby. Yeah, I mean it's funny, Ethan, because I made some notes for the show, and I've got this whole list of bullet points for CD Sissoko, who we're about to get into, and then for Wembenyama, I just wrote down Wemby is Wemby because he's unlike any other prospect we've seen. His
Mhm.
skill set is unlike any other player we've seen. Because of just his uniqueness overall, and it kind of fits that it's almost like his personality with him being unlike the other younger players. The point that you were bringing up, that kind of matches his play style as well. And he even said I'm remembering some stuff now, Ethan, in the G League Ignite press conference, he said, they asked him, who do you compare your game to? And he said, well, I want to be myself. I want to be Victor, or I want to be Wemby. Victor. He might have said Wemby, or he might have said his full name. It doesn't really matter. But then he went on to say like Giannis and KD were some of the other guys that he was taking after right now that he liked. But he put an emphasis on him wanting to be himself.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and you brought up KD there. Another thing that Dan Patrick was talking about with Sean is like the whole how everyone's talking about how Wemby needs to put on weight and muscle and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then Dan Patrick was like, "How much weight has Kevin Durant really put on since he got into the league?" And he's like, "He's been in the league since 2007." He
Right.
goes, "He might have put on 20 pounds of muscle." And he goes, "Really,
Hmm.
all it was is muscle tone. Like he's still extremely skinny. He's just muscular rather
He's
than."
had his injuries. He's had his
Yeah,
major injuries.
he has, and he's still dominant
Right.
as far as offensively. I think Wemby
Right.
has a higher upside defensively, but
He's a Hall of Famer,
yeah,
no
he,
doubt.
he was just saying skill set and being a unique player like Wemby will trump putting on all this muscle because who's going to bully him really? Like anymore, you don't get bullied.
Yeah. Yeah. And he even said that in the Good Morning America interview where he said, actually, I'd say guys need to skinny up.
Yep.
And, when we mentioned that, when I read that the first time, I wasn't sure if that was real. And then I saw it. But when I saw it in full context, it made a little bit more sense. He was just saying people like him,
Hmm.
if you put on all this weight, one, it can put a lot of stress on your joints. But also in the modern era of basketball, you want to be able to be more quick and agile and mobile and versatile so that you can switch on a lot of these cuts. And it's funny, I watched a little bit of his highlights as well as CD's before we got about on here. And, obviously this is stuff I've seen before, but just another little thing that I was reminded of watching him was his lateral quickness as
Mhm.
someone at his size. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
that's
incredible.
just not something that we've really seen before. And I know you can say that with a lot of stuff about Wembenyama, but that aspect of it, I was like, that's where I was just like, man, this build is just like, it's like he was born into this era at the right time.
Mhm.
It's why Nike's marketing him as a supernova.